Anyway, should we get going?
Yeah, let's get going. Yep.
More to you.
Am I on now? Yes?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Maura Henry here from Waterford. Delighted to welcome all our staff and students from all the various schools of architecture in Ireland. And a special hello to some of our alumni that I know are joining us as well. Before handing over to my director, producer, editor, etc., Garry, I would just like to say one thing about one of the items that we have today. Every now and again, we have a special moment, I suppose, in college where you have a father and a son, or a mother and daughter, or father and daughter, whatever, who are part of the school. So Harry Bent is a colleague for a long time, and his son Erannen was a student of ours a number of years ago. And we have a lovely interview later on between the two of them, which resonates on a lot of themes. Erannen is half Irish and half Finnish, and that sense of place and identity of both places are very important to him. A number of years ago, a group of us went out to Finland, to one of the islands that Erannen owns with his cousins and brothers and sisters, and we helped rebuild a very old sauna where there were timber tiles that had been there for the last, I don't know how many decades. And there was a lovely reversal of roles. Erannen has become so knowledgeable in certain crafts, including timber and all its uses, that we who had once mentored Erannen now suddenly became students again. And I don't really have a word for that, but it's bringing up some of the subjects we discussed when we were discussing our Japanese subject a few episodes ago. So I hope you really, really enjoy that. And it's not in any way suggesting that the other broadcasts that we have today are any less important. We have Alexis from Tanzania and Luke and many others. So enjoy, and thank you for joining us. So I'm going to hand over to Garry now. Thanks, Garry.
Okay, Maura, thanks. Yeah, later on we'll be talking to Aaron and his dad about about boat building for the most part. And we'll be talking to Alexis Cronin about his ventures in making furniture from recycled plastic in Tanzania. And then we'll be talking to Luke O'Keefe, who is a former WIT student and is a world champion in BIM. Now, in the first podcast we hosted a couple of weeks ago, the first podcast, that we WIT hosted in this series a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the culture of impermanence in Japanese architecture. Now, at the time, we weren't really sure exactly where it came from, and we started to sort of speculate in the course of the discussion, and maybe we didn't sound an awful lot like we knew what we were talking about. So what happened was one of our graduates, Adam Byrne, he saw the YouTube playback and he contacted us to let us know that he's actually been reading an awful lot about this topic lately. So we just decided to record his explanation for why it is the Japanese don't place such emphasis on permanence in their building.
There's kind of a historical and a cultural reason. The historical is a little bit more up in the air, so I think I'll touch on that first. Is that around the 6th century sometime, there was a growing influence of Buddhism, but more importantly, Chinese culture was kind of to grow through the country. So the emperor at the time, through kind of an effort to preserve the architecture, in about 785 or 675 or 85, something like that, started the whole process of the Ise Shrine will be rebuilt every 20 years. The reasons for it were, if you have to build it again every 20 years, as identical as it was beforehand, it would preserve what we have here. Otherwise, it would just decay in the background, it would knock it down and build over it. And also it was an effort to make sure that the crafts that were essential for that traditional style, the traditional craft elements, were taught to the next generation at a regular rate. It's the theory behind it. There's no documented proof, but that seems to be what it is. But from the cultural point of view, it kind of goes back to Shinto a little bit, where, with Japan being a very seismic island prone to natural disasters, there is within the culture, the reverence for nature is very strong, but it's not necessarily the way we would consider it in the West. It's very much, impermanence. You respect the lack of permanent state of things. Stuff will change, and you just have to learn to live with it, kind of thing. And the base of it is that in Shinto, to put it simply, is a natural religion. Really, it's kind of like some Western European civilizations where the natural landscape and natural elements are seen as themselves as the representatives of deities or divinity. but it's not really touched on. It's not really explicitly said or written down anywhere. But around the 18th century, they started to identify it as, I think there's a word for it. It's I think it's mononoare, which translates literally, I think, to an empathy towards things. Where I think that the best, it's a you know, kind of definition, but the best one I could find is it's a bittersweet but elated feeling, witnessing the cycle of life and knowing that it won't last, basically. And the example that they always use is, it's kind of a bit of a tried example, but it's the one that best applies to it, is like the sakura season. When everyone gets really excited, there's forecasts throughout for weeks about where the cherry blossom is blooming in different parts of the country, people follow it. Then you there see it, and in a day it gets blown out and it's on the ground, it's gone, it's dead. But the most beautiful element of it is seeing it destroyed. But you do have to face the fact that nature will take it away if it wants to.
So there you go. It's all about Ma and Shinto and animism. And I should say, if you've any questions first at all, just put them up in the chat box and we'll get back to them when we can. And some of the contributors are here today, so I'm sure they'll be happy to engage in discussion with you. Okay, now our next piece. Alexis Cronin was one of the first students to graduate from WIT with the BArch well over a decade ago now, I'd say. Now, directly after graduating, he spent time working as an architect in London, and then he decided to go to Tanzania to work on the design of a church. But when that project was over, Alexis stayed on in Tanzania and he set up a business which he calls Dunia, and they design and they make furniture from recycled plastics. Now, Alexis and I had a Zoom session a couple of days ago to chat about business, but it turned out to be quite a challenging interview because, as you'll see, our internet connection wasn't the best that it could possibly be. And the reason for that is that Alexis lives he lives in a very rural part of Tanzania, right up at the border with Kenya. So he's actually closer to Nairobi than to Dar es Salaam, and coverage there can be a bit of a challenge. So yeah, there'll be a few glitches and it'll be a little bit time laggy, but we hope it doesn't take away from your enjoyment of the piece. We'll start off though with a little promotional video that Dunia has made, to show their work. And then we will go into the interview with Alexis. Alexis, when you went to Tanzania in the first place, it was hardly with an idea of getting into the plastic recycling business. How did that all happen?
I came out to build a church, which turned into a cathedral, which went on for about 4 years. But in that time, I met Ivana, who's my now wife and mother of our 2 children. And we were having coffee one morning and we decided we'd like to do something in a business sense. And she's quite passionate about the environment. And I am quite passionate about design. So we were trying to see if there was something where we could merge the 2 passions. And so she dared me one morning to make a product out of waste plastic, whatever that would be. And so I designed a poof, a little footstool made from 16 very dirty plastic bottles that we collected off the street. And that was the beginning. It was a very modest, very basic, simple product, which was a very upcycling method of recycling, if you want to put it that way. And that was the beginning. From there, we went to a kind of a trade show. When we made the first footstool and it was 16 plastic bottles, she was like, okay, so now we need to make 1,000 of these to make a little bit of a difference in what we're doing. And so it went from a footstool to a couch to a coffee table to a desk, in a like a trade show. It seemed to take a lot of traction. People liked it. It was kind of quirky. It was funky. It was a simple, easy to understand idea that people got their head around, and it was liked. We sold out our furniture that weekend, and then orders started to come in, and all of a sudden, overnight, it kind of changed from being this dare into, oh, there might be a business in this.
When you started out, was the infrastructure there for you to tap into to allow you get access to raw materials, or did you have to develop that whole thing yourself?
So yeah, in the beginning, there was no infrastructure for us to begin. It was all just, it was our own capital. It was our own money that we were spending on paying people to go and collect the plastic, to upholster it, to make the product. So we didn't have anything as such. It was a very grassroots project. There was nothing formal about it at the beginning.
What kind of plastics are you recycling, Alexis?
So now then it was just it was upcycling plastic bottles, whereas now we're taking all plastics. So in Tanzania there's probably 3 main types of plastics. There's the PET bottle, and then polyethylene and polypropylene, most of which is all food packaging. There's still not a lot of there's very little PVC in this country. There's very little, the variety of plastics in this country is very minimal.
And is the process of recycling all of the types, the PET and polyethylene and so on, is that the same process, or do you have to separate out the materials and process them separately?
So yeah, you process them separately because obviously one will have a different property than the next. Obviously, something like PET is a very brittle property, and so if you were to extrude just a PET bottle, it would act a bit like a branch. It would snap quite quickly. Whereas polypropylene and polyethylene have more of a rigid strength, they have more tensile strength, they have more, their characteristics lend themselves to more options. So I suppose what we've been doing is kind of playing with formulas to try and refine the best ingredient percentages in order to create our furniture. We're not changing it for the different applications. Because if you were to change out your formula for different applications, it would be very hard to then recycle those products later. I don't want anyone to recycle my products later. I want them to last forever, or for as long as they can, or until somebody decides they want to change it. Then they can bring their product back to me, and then I can recycle it back into the same green wood base product. The majority of recyclers tend to recycle one strand of a plastic or one type of a plastic in order to create a perfect product. And that perfect product looks like plastic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the example that I usually give somebody is, Adidas have brought out this amazing recycled plastic trainer, and it's really cool and it looks amazing and it's phenomenal. But to create that one type, they're disregarding other types of plastic, or they're disregarding X percentage of the waste that could have been collected. Whereas we're the opposite. We're saying, oh, we don't care that the end product doesn't look like a perfect thing. Our products tend to have very evident remains of discoloration, or, you know, it's kind of like warts and all. All of our products have the flaws very visible, which to me makes sense, because then when you see our product, you kind of go, yeah, okay. It's a coffee table, for instance. You sit down, it reinforces the idea of recycling every time. Whereas I think with a lot of people who recycle high-end products, they tend to make it so perfect that it's you can't tell that it's recycled anymore.
In something like one of your sofas, is it fair to say that everything in the sofa is recycled material, including the fabric, the upholstery fabric?
So the fabric is the only thing that's not yet. So what we have currently is, if you take one of our sofas, you'll have a frame. So the frame will all be the recycled plank. That's fairly straightforward. Then you'll have, and that will get upholstered with a fabric. And the fabric is not recycled at the moment, but we are working with somebody in South Africa and the UK and in Belgium to try and overcome that. Inside the cushioning, we have recycled chips. So for instance, if I'm making a coffee table, I have my raw plank that I extruded or that I pressed, and I want it to have a smooth finish, put it through a planer. I get all this sawdust or all of that material would go into the stuffing of the couch. So we have what we call the shreds. These are all the shreds from the planing. And we also have a recycled PET fiber, which is basically what people use to create recycled t-shirts, shorts and whatnot. And then they're added together and mixed. And then that's what becomes the filling for all of our soft furnishing, all our cushioning, all our anything that's soft in our range.
Alexis, there's an obvious question with the use of plastics. I think there's always a concern about fire, especially when we're talking about using them for furniture. How do you deal with that issue?
Oh, I suppose in one sense it's a little different here in Tanzania, because you know most of the living that's done is outdoors. You know, a lot of it is an outdoor lifestyle. What
kind of volumes are you dealing with now? I mean, how many sofas do you produce weekly or monthly? Or
right. That's a very good question. So pre-COVID, I'd say we were probably doing somewhere between 20 and 50 items or pieces or products a month. Most of our clientele was the tourism industry, and so when COVID hit, the entire tourism industry pretty much collapsed overnight. And so what we were doing is, pre-COVID, everything was bespoke. So if you wanted a couch, an L-shaped couch or an S-shaped couch, or you know, we were doing it to on demand, which was slowing up our entire process. So when COVID hit, we were left with two options. One was to just pack it all in, or the second one was to reinvent ourselves. And that's what we've been doing for the last 6 to 7 months, is just creating ranges and collections rather than doing the bespoke model. I would say pre-COVID, we were doing between 20 and 50, depending on the month, depending on the client, depending on the product. Whereas now everything slowed down. And so now it's all depending on how this launch kicks on from after last weekend.
Yeah, you had this serious launch the weekend. We were completely rebranding the product and relaunching the company, really. Alex, where do you see this going? What's your goal or your aim for the development of the business?
When we first did this, we made that first footstool, and Ivana, being Ivana, was she looked at it and she said, "Oh, this is amazing! This is fantastic! I can see this in Google." And I laughed. But earlier this month, we supplied Google with exporting them furniture from Tanzania. And we're the first Tanzanian company to become a supplier to Google. And so over this last 5 years, we've gone from something that was a bit of a joke and a bit of a dare and a bit of a mom and pop show on the back of a veranda to something that we all believe to be a genuine contribution to a solution. I don't ever think that what we're doing is the solution. I think there's a multitude of solutions that are required in order to try and combat this plastic plight. But it's a global thing, and we're a small little entity in Tanzania, but we're in the process of establishing an agreement with Google in Northern Holland. We have partners set up in the UK and in Portugal. And so the whole idea is that the systems that we've developed are 100% transferable to other parts of the world. So one would like to think that this is replicatable anywhere. There's endless possibilities for where it could go to and where it could expand to. And all of which I think we're at a stage now where we've proven the concept, and it's just a matter of fine-tuning the different geographical constraints.
So there we go. And I noticed from the chat that Alexis has already made a couple of sales somewhere down in Waterford. Okay, so now, in addition to the BR course that we have in the Department of Architecture here in WIT, we also have a degree which specialises in BIM. And last year, one of our students, a young chap called Luke O'Keefe, was actually crowned the World BIM Champion at the World Championships, which are held in Kazan. Now, we can't really claim all of the glory to ourselves for his great success, because Luke was part of a two-man team, and his partner on that team was actually a TUD student called Ryan Dempsey, who I'm hoping he's on the Zoom call with us now, although I did leave it pretty late to make contact with him over the weekend. Anyway, hopefully he's here. Now, personally, I had absolutely no idea myself how big a deal this thing was until I actually saw that this little video that Luke had made explaining what his experience was like. So we're going to show you the video that Luke made right now, and we hope that you will be as impressed as we were.
Hi everyone. First of all, I would just like to introduce myself. My name is Luke O'Keefe, and I'm a recent graduate from the Architecture and Building Information Modelling BIM technology course at Waterford Institute of Technology. I suppose the presentation is just about my recent trip to Kazan at World Skills, hence the title, The Road to Kazan and Back. I suppose we'll start with the introduction of BIM to Ireland Skills, which started in May 2018 in DIT Bolton Street. And there was a total of 9 competitors, I think. I suppose then a year later, we went on to Ireland Skills 2019. And here was the first time all skill competitions were held under the one roof in the RDS in Simmons Court. As you can see there, there was approximately 123 competitors and about 18,000 visitors. So BIM was not a full skill at World Skills, it was a demonstration skills, and it was in the future skills section, along with 23 other skills. The likes of drone operation, laser technology, augmented and virtual reality. So the thing you see pop up here is called a technical description. So every skill has one, and basically just outlines all the skills required for as part of your skill. Going over to Russia, there was a full team, so Team Ireland. The image on the left, you can see the full Irish team that went to Kazan and that competed. And on the right then, we have the BIM team. So the BIM team was a two-person competition. So you can see myself there, the BIM expert, which was my lecturer in Waterford Institute of Technology, also Gordon Chisholm, and then also my teammate in the competition, which would have been Ryan Dempsey from TU Dublin. So I suppose, just looking in the bottom right there, you can see the technical description again that I just flashed up earlier on. I suppose the thing about this is I had a lot of information in it, and it's kind of what's called the World Skills Standard Specification. So each skill had one, and it basically described what skills may be tested in the competition. From this, myself and my teammate Ryan, we set up kind of a spreadsheet, and we said we'd go for a traffic light approach just to see what areas we were good at and comfortable, and then these areas didn't need much attention at the moment, and then we could focus more on the more poor areas, which are the ones marked in red. It was good to see those from doing this that myself and Ryan, although studying similar courses, we had different skill sets. I was better in some areas than him, and likewise he had more experience than me in other areas. This actually worked out for the best in the end, as we could bounce ideas off each other, and together we could just come up with the best solution and just a lot faster. The technical description gave a breakdown of the competition and how it was going to be judged. You can see this up the top left there. It was broken down into 6 different modules. The first one is understanding a BIM execution plan and setting up a common data environment. Module 2 then was architectural modeling. Module 3, structural modeling. Module 4, BIM coordination. Module 5, corrective modeling. Module 6 then was visualizations. So just from the little snips around the PowerPoint then there, you can just see that there's a few different images from each of the stages that we kind of progressed through as we were preparing for the competition. So interesting enough, we didn't just focus on training for a skill, like we also had to train the mind. I started off by doing up a food diary and fitness programs where occasionally we got sports psychologists in and dietitians. As part of this, we were told we were actually having to go on an alcohol ban for the period of the training. And so this was 12 weeks prior to the competition. So basically there was no drinking for the entire summer. At first I just thought they were missing, because what will I be doing, just kind of sitting on the computer. But no, I did kind of take it on board, and I'm glad I done it as well, because they were right. The information, as in they were giving us, it wasn't just about training for your skill, it's about training your mind and your body and being in the right place, both physical and mentally, and just getting ready to compete, knowing that you're in the best shape and you can conquer anything that's just put in front of you, From there then, I suppose after a couple of months of working and training, we kind of got into the test project. So we didn't actually get any information about the project or what we were going to get, but we just kind of got more of a structure of how the competition was going to be run. So I suppose from here then, we took the planning out the test project. We kind of broke down that document, see how the competition is going to be run and what way it was going to be done. So it was going to be done, we looked at it day by day, and then module by module, and then literally task by task. Yeah, that was kind of really it then until it was time to go. I suppose you'll kind of see now over the coming slides that it really was truly amazing. Our competition was a 3-day competition. It was ran over 19.5 hours. Prior to that then, we did arrive a couple of days before the competition, and I think it was C-2. We had an orientation day, which meant we came in and we kind of looked at our setup at the computers, make sure everyone was happy, make sure everything was as it was supposed to be, that the software was installed on the computers, that we were going to be comfortable with using them in the competition. So I suppose that when we landed over in Kazan first, we got a bit of a tour around the city, which was very nice. Then we kind of come on to the competitors' village, which is again, it's something you'd never experienced before, and I don't know if I ever will again. the entire sports village. So it was built for it was specially built just for the Youth Olympics a couple of years ago. It's over covers an area of 53 hectares. There's 28 buildings, so there are apartment buildings and there's apartments inside the buildings. 5,400 guests. All sports facilities. It has its own supermarket, its own canteen, salon, you name it, they have it there. Like, and then from there, then down the bottom left, you can kind of see on the first day when we arrived, there was a flag raising event where basically every country kind of stood beside their flag. From there, then there's actually just down on the bottom right, you can see that we planted a tree while we were there. So each country came in and they also planted a tree. This was also part of that opening ceremony. I suppose then maybe even just have a quick look at the Kazan Expo. So this is where the competition was actually held. So this is was over an area of just under 75 hectares. And so it's a pretty big site. Just up in the top left, you can see a map of the expo and all the different areas. And so kind of each skill was set into one area. Just there beside that then is the image from Google Maps. And then there's just a couple of photos from there from around the actual expo. So you see popping up here now is a little red square. That red kind of square rectangle is actually the size of the RDS in Dublin. So that kind of shows you the scale of everything from the RDS in Dublin, which we thought was big at 18,000 competitors and 23 skills on one roof. Now this was something completely different. This is just a couple of little snips from competition area and just kind of showing the setup and so this was kind of really the day when we walked in. A couple of images here, just up the top left there is just an image of all of the experts, so from each country, and then we also had an skills area manager, so we kind of just looked after, in our case it was all the IT and that, so for any problems we go to him, and then we also had a translator there as well because some of the stuff was in Russian. And then from there then, I suppose just beside that one, you can see an image of all the competitors. So there was myself and Ryan Dempsey representing Ireland. There was also then 2 competitors from Poland, 2 from Russia, 2 from Singapore, and 2 from Belarus. Just over on the right then, you can kind of see that this was a really weird experience actually. Although we've done a couple of interviews over there, this one was very different. It was with Russian national television, and it was actually done in Russian. So I had to have a translator there for that. And so basically, so they'd ask me the question in Russian, so it'd be translated into English. And I'd answer in English and translate it back into Russian then for their national television. Also, as part of the trip, we took place in an event called One School, One Country. And this really was amazing. So each country that is participating in World Skills Kazan is matched up with a school in Kazan. And from there, then you go, you visit the school, but the school knows you're coming about 12 to 14 months in advance that we were coming. And from there, then they were planning it the whole time. You can see this there on the image on the bottom right. They planted a flower bed of the colours from the Irish flag. They also then performed a lot of songs and dances for us, while also then giving us kind of a few of the local delicacies. I suppose then kind of in return, we kind of brought over a few hurls and slitters, and we were kind of showing how to hit the ball and that as well. So it was actually very good fun. We came on to the opening ceremony. So this is the night before the big day. You can see it was on in the Kazan Arena. So there's just a couple of snips there, just on the right there of interviews we were doing before and after the ceremony. Just on here, then this is just a snip of the actual stadium while the ceremony is underway. Just at the start of it when the fireworks and everything is going off. So it is really a nice picture. There was 63 different countries and covering 56 different skills. So it really was big, like Joe's, and never experienced that like it before. There was over 1,300 competitors and experts each, and then there was also over 3,500 volunteers, and then about 272,000 visitors. It was a challenge to try to stay focused during the competition, but I suppose I kind of just went back to my usual tactic, which was headphones on and just get on with what needed to be done. It's a full stadium, 45,000 seats, absolutely packed. And just where the arrow was pointing there, that's just where the Irish supporters and experts were located. And here's a small little few images of the competition as we went through it. We were almost straight into it. Before each competition day, you were allowed to have a chat with your expert, and from there then you could talk about maybe how you're going to progress through the day and what you're going working on, and kind of what you should prioritize. Talking to your expert outside of this time was prohibited. I suppose then just over on the right then you can kind of see an image of John Halligan, the TD, who's Minister of Training, Skills, Innovation and Research and Development. He was actually over in Kazan with us, and you can see from the image there that he was actually just a few meters in front of me there, looking at what I was doing up on the computer screen in front of him. So my computer was projected onto that screen, and any work that I was doing was shown to any visitors walking around. So from here then, competition was over. It was time for the Future Skill Awards ceremony. It was a bit weird when we were going in. We were told that the ceremony was going to take place in Russian. So we were given a device with an earpiece in it, and it would be translated live into our ears, so we could hear it, the same version in English as the show was going on. And what was weird as well was that BIM was the first skill to be called up, and we heard through the earpiece that they were going to announce the top 3 teams, and then they will come up on the stage, and then they will announce the winners from there. That was okay until they announced the top 3, which was Ireland, Russia, and Belarus. And for the minute we heard our name being announced to go up on the stage, we just ripped out the earpiece and ran up onto the stage. In hindsight, it probably wasn't the best idea because we were stood up on stage not knowing what was going on. So that was grand. Yeah, they were talking away for a while, and next minute then the Russian competitors stepped forward and they were walking up to the podium. They announced Russia, and I was like, oh, are they just announcing the winner? Like, are they just going up to stand up? And I kind of whispered to Ryan, I was like, oh, I don't have a good feeling about this. But then they stood on to the second place podium, and then I was thinking, oh, all right. All of a sudden we heard a big massive cheer from the crowd. So it was all the Irish, the other competitors and the supporters in the crowd with big cheer. And then they called out the Belarus girls, and they started walking up, and we were thinking, oh no, what's happening now? And then they stand up in second place beside the Russians on the podium. And then that's when, and I thought to myself, again, there's no one left, like, it's just us. And we look down to the crowd, you just see all the Irish supporters there. They were just jumping up and down, like, screaming their head off. And then, so it really, really was amazing, like, taking a couple of steps and then standing up onto the top spot on the podium. Like, it really was unreal. Like, it's very, very hard to describe. And yeah, then that was it. Competition was over. Award ceremony was over. We had a good night on the last night, a good night to celebrate, and then it was time to come back home. So back to Ireland. One of the main events that I really did enjoy was going up to Áras an Uachtaráin to meet the president, Michael Lee Higgins. So he hosted a reception up there for us and for the whole World Skills team, competitors, experts, and delegates. And then also a kind of a big one that I kind of regard as one of the highest in kind of industry kind of recognition is from CETA, so the Construction IT Alliance. That was really a nice one to be awarded a lifetime membership of there. It's good to see that you are getting good recognition, not just, we'll say, from family and friends and colleagues, but actually you're getting proper recognition within the industry that you're going to go working in, like, and that's kind of the biggest thing. And then we're also invited up into the Dáil, and we were speaking in front of a committee up there. So where I'm at now. So like I was saying, yes, the headhunting kind of started straight after competition at all the events. So we're approached by numerous companies. I am now working for a company called Gaga Muller. We're a digital project management company. My role as a digital project manager, I wouldn't really be able to achieve it only for the competition, really. And so that's kind of what kind of opened me up to it as well. But also then the opportunities that the company could supply to me then in return for that was like the first kind of role I was on was a project over in the Netherlands in Groningen. So I was flew over to Groningen for about 6 months working over there. While I was over there, I was managing the digital workflow of site mapping and YTT meetings. So just kind of tracking all works that are being done on site across multiple buildings. And now actually what I'm mainly working on is a project in London where I am the main point of contact for the company on that project. So I'm performing all of our coordination and I'm running all of our coordination meetings on that project. As well as that, then we're kind of starting to look into the 4D side of things, and I'm kind of developing most of the processes at the moment anyway. So yeah, that's it. I'd just like to say thanks again though to Garry Miley and Maura Henry for putting together this podcast and giving me the opportunity to speak on it and just share my experience from World Skills Kazan. And then also then there's one special more thanks to Gordon Chisholm, lecturer in WIT, who was the World Skills expert for Ireland in the skill BIM. So it wouldn't have been possible without him also, you know, and he also helped put this presentation together.
So there you go. Well done to Luke and to Ryan. Wouldn't you just love to be interviewed in Russian? I think that would be class. You've arrived when you've been interviewed in Russian. Now, we have a question from Sarah Bona, and she wants to know about, is it possible to use the recycled, this is going back to Alexis's piece, to use recycled plastics to create buildings or parts of them like stairs, partitions, or structural elements. Sarah, with regard to the products that Alexis is making, I don't know the answer to that. I know that they're doing decking, and I've seen some images as well where they did some partitions for changing rooms for a very nice external swimming pool. But I don't think Alexis is with us, so I'll pass on the question and we'll make sure we get back to you. Okay, now, in addition to being another former student of ours, Erannen Bent is also the son of one of our lecturers, Harry Bent. And since completing his master's degree at the Centre for Alternative Technology in Machynlleth in Wales, Erannen has been boat building in his semi-native Finland. The other day, he recorded a chat with his dad, Harry, and he was telling him about his career and about how his latest boat building project is progressing.
I'm interviewing here for WIT. You're a graduate from 2012, isn't that right? You completed 3 years in architecture, left with a Bachelor of Architectural Science. You moved over to Finland from here. Then you came back here onto Wales, and now you're back in Finland again. In that time, you worked in an architect's office, worked with builders, completed your studies, and now you're boat building in Finland. Is that right? Have I missed out on anything important?
No, the civilian service in Finland was a sort of a little extra bit that I wasn't expecting.
Now, when you finished third year, I remember talking to Juhani Pallasmaa, my former boss, on your behalf and asked if he would give you some advice on your career. So what advice did he give you?
Yeah, he was kind enough to have a sit down and have a chat. I sort of showed him my portfolio work of what I'd done in the first 3 years. And then the main thing I think that stuck with me, I guess, was what he said was go and find and experience as much as you can, go and find as many sort of, what would you call it, like influences, I guess, as you can. Explore them, play music, build things, explore your interests, read, and just sort of like, I guess always I would have kept it in mind in how it relates to architecture, but it was really just to go and try things out. I think that was the main thing that stuck with me.
Was it good advice?
It was good advice, yeah. I mean, I guess I sort of end up doing that sort of thing anyway. I've tried a lot of different things. And
moving on then, you worked in an architect's office there.
Yeah, originally I got a place in Aalto University on a timber architecture course, but it was sort of an additional year leading up to a master's, but it was quite high fees. I discovered once I got to Finland and realized that I wouldn't qualify for any kind of grant or student loan. So I kind of had to forego that year, which is, I've always had like an interest in timber as a material. And I ended up, got a job in a sort of small office, using quite a bit of timber, but different stuff as well.
What was the name of that office?
Pook, P-O-O-K, which means it's a kind of a traditional type of knife. Pook is the Norwegian for puukko. Puukko is a Finnish type of knife.
Okay.
So I guess they're kind of looking for kind of crafting.
And then you moved on to work with a builder and get practical experience. He was the builder who worked on our experimental house. Is that right?
Where we used to live was very nearby where the office was as well. So it's quite like a wooded area in the countryside, some agricultural land. So it was like, the office I ended up working in was 500 meters away from where I started primary school. So it's quite an interesting sort of connection there. And then, after that I went to work for a contractor who, again, was a contractor who built our house there and was building quite similar houses to the buildings that we were designing and detailing in that office. So it was good to get the kind of practical experience, and that was one of my first opportunities to sort of put something from what I'd only seen on paper and the theoretical sort of side of things, and then put it into practice and see it being realized.
You moved back to Ireland then, and your focus was on sustainable architecture. This brought you on to Wales and the Centre of Alternative Technology, yeah?
I just had a feeling that I wanted to get back into spent 3 years in WIT. I had some experience now working and kind of wondered where that was going to go. And whereas previously I hadn't had an interest in, or I didn't have a specific interest in architecture, I'd sort of start to become more aware of the environmental concerns, working on a building that was energy efficient, but producing a lot of waste. And there was no plan for what would happen to the building at the end of its life. Concrete, plastics, steel, that kind of thing, difficult to recycle or to kind of untangle all the materials from each other. So there were things that I started to think about, and then stepped back from it for a bit, and then came back to Ireland, and actually through DHB from Barry O'Sullivan, he'd mentioned CAT as a place that he considered to go and do his master's. And I just looked into it, got an interview and brought a portfolio with me, and got a place then to start in 2016.
I know that those 2 years you spent studying and completing your architectural studies, and afterwards working in Wales, your interest in sustainable design had grown. Your interest in timber as a building material had developed through your work in Wales, and now this has brought you back to Finland. Why have you moved back there?
Why am I here again? That's a good question. I'm always sort of in between. I feel like I've got a home in Ireland and a home in Finland. So that's one reason I've got a point of reference sort of here, sort of culturally. I feel I miss a lot of things in Finland. And then also it has a very strong reputation, a good reputation in terms of not just sort of traditional timber construction and use of timber in terms of like log cabins and the kind of forestry industry, but also they're developing sort of new, more engineered timber solutions, I guess. So they've got a whole broad range.
But you're not designing houses up there?
No, I'm not.
What are you
doing? No. Well, they've also got the sort of the Nordic countries. You've got Sweden, Norway, Finland, and sort of areas in between are known for the clinker build sort of style of boats. It's known as this kind of the birthplace of clinker build. Maybe Viking ships are the type of boats that people would recognize most easily in terms of clinker build. And it has been developed here they're really unsure about the time, but possibly a few thousand years. The technique has advanced quite a lot. And they're still in use in terms of they were used as work boats up until very recently. And now they're used for sort of leisure boating. And it has survived as a sort of skill that I've always been interested in.
Is your interest in sailing or something more than that?
It's difficult to say. I think.
Are you not building a boat?
I am building a boat. Yeah. I thought you were asking me where the interest came from. But the interest, I think, has come from that experience of sort of being on the water somewhere in a wooden boat. The sort of the sound, the smell of the timber, the wood pitch that's used for treating it here, and the clinker build on the water has a very different noise as well, very different sound. It's like an acoustic experience as well, and that has stuck with me from childhood. And then seeing these boats sort of around, and then having an interest in woodwork and building in general and use of timber, it's sort of always been a bit of a dream to actually kind of create one of those boats as well for myself. And sort of the one that I'm building now is an attempt to recreate a sort of boat that we used to use in our childhood that used to belong to my granddad, which was a sort of traditional boat built in a workboat built in the 50s for the forestry industry for transporting sort of small log rafts on the lakes here.
So you made a template of that boat, and working with the template, you're building a new boat.
I measured it up. It's sort of in such bad repair. It's in a boat shed on an island that can't really be moved from there. That would be the easiest thing. If it had been easy to move, the easiest way to recreate it would have been to bring it to the workshop and measure it up here and kind of use it as a point of reference. But I kind of had to copy the forms in the boat shed and then take the templates with me and measure it up and draw it up. Then you draw it at 1-to-1.
You talk about materials. It's a timber boat, right? Is it a special timber used in boat building?
It's not special in terms of the type of the species of timber is most commonly found in Finland, which is sort of Scandinavian pine. You get some of it in Scotland, the sort of Caledonian forests, the remnants of the Scots pine is the same species, but the kind of selecting the right tree and selecting the right boards and materials, that's the kind of challenging bit, and it's becoming more and more challenging with sort of fertilized forests and things. The growth rings are too spaced apart and you don't really get any durability in the timber. So I think selecting a very common tree, but getting the proper quality is the difficult kind of part of it.
Would you go out into the forest with your colleagues there and select the trees, or how does it work?
It would have been in terms of like longer courses. What they have done before is that selecting it for the next sort of 2-year course, because you can't kiln dry it. You need to dry it kind of air dried minimum of a year. Ideal is 2 to 3 years. And if you're kind of using the root forms like natural curvatures in the trees, you're kind of talking about heavier branches and the root stock sort of trunk area, and that you could be talking 4 or 5 years. But we're taught the theory of that and then shown some of the timber here that has been selected previously for that use and dried, but they come from mills who are still providing that kind of timber. But there's a whole theory, kind of one tree, one boat, where you can get everything you need for a sort of 5-meter rowing boat from one tree, including the kind of wood pitch for it, and everything, kind of using every last bit of it.
I imagine there's a lot of specialist tools involved, steaming the timber, bending it. Are these provided on your course, or do you make them yourselves?
You'd be surprised, really. The tools are quite simple. It's the tradition of sort of boat building has been honed to make it as simple as possible, so that there used to be kind of tens of boat builders in every village. Sort of you're making your own boats. So the tools are relatively simple, but of course then to speed it up for kind of production and then for more complicated projects, you can add to your list of tools, but it's not an expensive thing to kind of take on to build a rowing boat, which is what most people start off with. And the steam boxes, you can build your own. There's some here, but a steam box really is just a plywood box and a wallpaper stripper that you just plug in. And then if you're doing like big batches steaming a lot in one go, then you can kind of get more high tech in a way. But steaming is really, all these methods are very, very simple in a way.
And what stage is the boat at?
So a fair bit of it at the beginning was actually translating the sort of the survey sketches and the templates then into a one-to-one drawing. So you kind of, you draw everything out to scale on a large sort of sheet of sort of 5.5 meter drawing, sort of in length. You draw a plan view, your section, and then you can kind of test. It's quite, you kind of create a grid overlay over your section where you can kind of dot the points of the curvatures and then check sort of diagonal reference points in terms of whether what you've drawn will actually make a boat that will perform well in the water, basically. So you start off with the drawing, and then you make the arches that you actually build, the kind of template, the forms that you build beside the boards around, and then you build the main kind of the skeleton, it's called in Finnish, of the boat. And then around that you start putting on your pine boarding. So I've started the boarding now, got the first two pairs out of 5 done, and hopefully by Christmas I'll have all that sort of done and have the sort of this internal supports as well.
How would you describe your understanding of timber, having worked with it in this way?
I think I always knew the potential of timber, I guess, but I didn't know how to approach it really. Since sort of doing woodwork in school, I'd always had an interest in it, and I feel like although the techniques are sort of straightforward in a way, the whole act of putting it together and the millimeter perfect sort of jointing and patience and care that it takes has given me confidence to sort of to use timber, I think, in a very different way, and to look. I'm not sure if it has changed my view of timber as a material. I've always loved timber as a material and the smell of it and the kind of the many different things you can do with it. It's just sort of kind of affirmed that for me, really.
Erannen, I think I'll wrap this up now. Everyone here wishes you well. A number of tutors have been keeping an eye on your progress, Jürgen, Fintan, Maura, to name a few. We look forward to seeing you and the finished boat.
Feel free to get in touch if you want to share my email, erannen.bent@hotmail.com, if anyone has any questions or wants any further information on sort of boat building and what's happening here as well. Just get in touch.